Welcome to the Woodturning Workshop. Today's show is about inspiring yourself to do something a little bit different that you've never done before and to try materials you've never used before. And hopefully we'll achieve that in today's show, because today we're going to be going nuts about nuts. Stay tuned. Can't juggle. Welcome to this old garden. No, sorry. A lot of you send me emails, and one of the questions that keeps popping up is, Tim, what's your favorite thing to turn? Well, I really don't have a favorite thing to turn. My favorite thing about turning is to turn a lot of different things and try different things. And as you can see, my style of work is a little bit eclectic. I can't really keep my mind on one thing too long. I like to move to the next thing. And I always want a challenge. One thing I do, and I would like you to keep this in mind to really challenge yourself, is look for the ugliest piece of wood you can find. This is manzanita burl, and it's also dusty. But anyway, it's an ugly root ball. It comes from California and the desert area, in that area, and it's full of rocks and stuff, and it's hard to turn, but once you turn it, you can just get an incredible looking project out of it. This is a really neat, unusable vessel. On top of that, I like to think outside the box a little bit when I'm turning things like tops. People always make the same type of top. Well, why not dress it up a bit? Use a little bit of burl. Do some different steps and designs. Don't do the same thing everybody else does. Use it for practice, but also challenge yourself and move yourself further. That way you can take that idea and change it and make it your own. And that's how I got to this. I got tired of making small tops one day. I made up a bunch of tops and got really bored, so I decided to grab some Purple Heart and some Cherry and make this. It took a little bit longer than one top. Also, while I was thinking big, I decided to go ahead and make a chalice. Now, this would be great at Oktoberfest, but not in the house, but you get the idea. Do something a little bit different that makes you stand out from the crowd. One thing I like to do is to turn burls. You can do a normal turning with a burl, or in this case, with this maple burl, I made a plaque for the Wood Turn of the Year a few years ago at our club, and they wanted to honor his wife also, so we thought, well, I'll turn this here and I'll turn this here. Simple, right? But think about it. This thing is turning around like a giant cleaver on the lathe while it was turning. It was quite a challenge. It was a lot of fun. And no, we are not going to do a show on it because I don't want the liability. I do like to think small sometimes too, and we had a challenge with a few of us at the club so you can make the thinnest spindle turning. And this is ebony, and I think I won. And the fun thing about it was I also turned a captive ring. I don't know if you can see it right there on the piece. And so that was really fun to do. And turning is about fun. It's about doing things that bring you pleasure. Yeah, it's a little frustrating at times, but you know, it's really worth the effort. And it also can help change your life. This is a project I did. It's a very special one. This is a ring I turned for my wife when I proposed to her. So like I said, wood turning is a great hobby. It's also life-changing for you. It gives you a great outlook on life. You look at things differently and you have a lot of fun. But enough about me and my work. Let's get in the shop and start on today's project. A couple of years ago, I met a really interesting fellow, Gene Duran. I like to call him the Nut King of North America. Basically, he is a man who knows his nuts. We're talking about nuts that you can turn. Palm tree type of nuts, other type of trees that have really interesting nuts that dry and become hard. And as you can see, he sent me some photos of the different type of nuts that you can turn, and they're really interesting looking. I mean, they have great variations in color. They have differences in size. I mean, we have some things here that are 1.25 inches tall or a 1/2 inch tall. You can see that they're, each nut is different and quite a bit different. And here's a good view of a whole bunch of different types of nuts. And well, you kind of ask yourself, what can I do with these nuts? And you can turn neat little objects from them. And as you can see here, every inside of a nut is different. So the objects you turn really depend on what that nut is like and how it was grown. And you can see Gene does some beautiful work here. He does ebony lids to it. He's doing fluting on them. That is a beautiful piece right there. And they're tiny. It's incredible work that he does. And you can see he does some that don't have lids on them. They got a little bit of the natural bark showing. This one's a nice tall one with an ebony stem, it looks like. And here he's done a nice little fluted lid here with a little bell top, or teardrop top. I think that's gorgeous. And here's another shot of a lot of his work. And that's the cool thing about nuts, is you can't really say what you're going to turn with them. And that's it, exactly it. I've made a few things before this show, and I wanted to do a specific thing, but I can't guarantee you what we're going to do, because you just never know what's going to show up in the nut. Today's tools. Well, I really can't tell you what today's tools are either. I know we'll use spindle gouges, we'll probably use scrapers, and probably a parting tool. And who knows what else. Oh no, we're not going to start juggling again, but we are going to start with an ivory palm nut. It's one of the larger nuts, so it's a good one to start with if you're beginning on nut turning. Now, how do you turn the nut? Well, you need to mount it on the lathe somehow, and one manner is to sand the bottom and take a glue chuck and just glue it on there. You have to use like 2-part epoxy or some really strong glue to hold it. Sometimes that breaks away. What I like to do is actually take this between centers, and I have a little steb center on here, and it's a neat little device that has a spring in the tip so it won't really damage the nut, and it's going to center up on this void right there. And I'm going to bring in my tailstock, which has a live center with a point on it. Because this is all round, I don't have any good contact, so a single point makes the best contact. And I want to kind of get this centered up a bit so I don't waste too much of the nut. And that looks pretty good. Bring our tool rest up, lower it a little bit, and we're going to cut a tenon with our parting tool. We're going to start this up, bring the speed up, and you can see that it's really out around and really wobbly. So I'm going to come in carefully like this and cut down until I feel solid nut. Okay, almost there. One more cut. It's a little jumpy till you start getting to the solid core of the nut. Makes pretty neat shavings once you're there, though. Okay, that looks pretty good. We'll stop it and see. Oh yeah, we have a nice tenon on there now. So I'm going to move my tailstock back and bring this back. Oops, sorry. Gonna move the tailstock a little further. And we're gonna take out our steb center. And we're going to mount on here our chuck with little bitty pin jaws. And pin jaws are jaws that just grab little tiny things. We'll put this on here, get it nice and tight. And we're gonna take this, open it up, and mount this in here. Now you don't want to crush it. You just want to gently put some pressure on there. If you go too tight, it will shatter it and you'll have a problem. And I'm going to bring my tailstock back up and use that point to help stabilize this as I start to turn it. Lock that down. I'm bringing this in. I have a short little tool rest so I can get access to this. We're not going to use our parting tool though. We're going to use a 1/2-inch spindle gouge, and it's got a standard grind on it, because if you use one with too pointy of a grind, it'll dive in. You're cutting air right now, and you want to be able to have good control of the tool, and the wider blade gives you better control. Now we're actually roughing this out, but at the same time you can start creating a bead, because the nut is round and you want to get rid of most of this outer surface. And actually I'm going to pick the speed up a little bit more, because this is such a small diameter, we need the higher RPMs to make our cuts smoother, or to make smoother cuts. That sounds better. Anyway, I'm just starting the cut, rotating the tool, lifting the handle, and then letting it follow. I'm going to make that a little bit off there. Just make sure you stay clear of the jaws on your chuck, because these tools don't cut metal that well. And remember, we've got to come in and make a foot down here, so we got to be a little bit higher or a little away from the chuck on this shape. Let's see what this looks like right now. Pretty cool. The texture of these nuts are close to composite material. If you've ever turned pins with those man-made blanks, it's like that. It's like turning a plastic. One really cool thing about turning a plastic is look at these shavings. They are just incredible. They just fly off. I think they're prettier than the nuts sometimes. Oops, now did you hear that little chatter? That's because the nut has different densities. And so you'll be going along and you're on a real solid part of the nut, and then you'll hit a piece of the nut that didn't dry quite the same. It maybe is a little more porous, a little more cracked. And then you'll hear that chatter, and what happens is your tool skates across really quickly. And it's not a bad thing, but it'll not tear the grain. There's no grain to tear, but it will make less of a pretty surface. So you got to come back and go really slowly through that section. There we go, hit that section again. So it looks like I'm getting into good shape. I haven't found any voids yet, so this is going to be probably a nice little narrow pot. And I'm going to leave the top natural. I like that look. So just a little more touching up here and we'll be hollowing. Now before you hollow out your vase, vessel, or whatever you're making out of the nut, go ahead and sand, because the heat buildup when it's thin could crack the nut. And I sanded all the way up to 4,000 grit, and look at that surface. It is gorgeous. Now I have a Jacob's chuck mounted in my lathe, and I still have the lathe at about sanding speed, 500 to 800 RPM. I'm going to take a drill, and I've marked the depth I want to go, and we're going to drill a center hole. Now, it might wobble a little bit when it makes contact because it's uneven. And we really don't have to worry about clearing out chips too much because there's a void in here and there's not much I'm clearing out. But this is an easy way to get started on the hollowing. And there we go. That is just deep enough. We'll bring that out. Okay, I'm going to take the tailstock, remove it, get my exercise in. We're going to bring up the tool rest, and I've got it set just slightly above center. And I'm going to use a round nose scraper. Now I made this one myself, but you can find these at stores very easily. And I'm going to present the scraper down a little bit low, and this is just like any other hollowing, except it's going to be a little jittery right at the beginning because we're cutting a natural edge. But I'm swinging the tool, advancing it, swinging the tool, advancing it. Bit by bit, we're going to work our way down there and thin this out. A little squealing sometimes. That's probably because you're taking too aggressive of a cut. And well, the other thing is I forgot to increase my speed from the drilling. There, now we're kicking it, because you do need the speed picked up to help you with the cut. Oh, that's much nicer. Now you can use this tool to do much of the hollowing, or most of the hollowing, but you're going to wind up with the point where you're going to need to get around the curve of the nick. And you don't have too many hollowing tools that are small enough to go in there, so you might have to make your own. And dental picks are really nice for this. They don't last very long, but you can buy them pretty cheaply. And this one's just cut into a little scraper shape. And you can come in here, and I've put it on a handle. You can buy these too, and it's a neat little handle, just tightens down on anything you have. It's better than turning the handle for something you're going to have to throw away later. Just use it about like any scraper. It takes little tiny shavings, so you don't move a lot of material with this scraper, but you can see how it works. And I'm going to move back to my larger scraper for a little bit yet. I'm going to stop this real quick. Lower the tool rest, make sure I'm just about right on center. There we go, a little bit above it. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and hollow the rest of this out, and then whoops, sorry. Show you a trick for getting the thickness of your walls just where you want them. Now I've worked my way down into here and removed most of the inside of the nut, and so my wall thickness is getting to be really critical, but I don't have any calipers thin enough to measure the wall, and just using my fingers is not really an accurate way of doing it. Well, there's a really cool trick that you can do, and it involves using a light. This light is perfect because it shines through the walls. So as I turn now, I watch to see the difference in the color in there. As it gets brighter and brighter, I know I'm getting thinner and thinner. And with a little practice, you'll get to know how thin you are by the color. Let me get some of that cleared out so you can see again, of the light shining through. And that's getting pretty thin, but that's still about 1/8 of an inch. I can take that down even further. So I'm going to work on this a little bit more and hollow it out and get it down to the exact thinness I want the walls to be. Well, I whittled away on this, and now I've got it where I like it. I got a little portable light here. You can see I'm at about 1/32 of an inch thick there. And using a light for turning this is just fantastic because it's the easiest way to see where you are and not go through the sides. Well, the next step we have to do is we have to part this off, and I'm going to put a tenon on it because there's a void in the bottom and I won't have a pretty foot. We'll attach a piece of ebony to fix that. Now to part this off, I'm going to use a different tool. It is a very thin blade parting tool. It's a 1/16 of an inch wide, and it makes a very tiny cut. And I need that. Also, you might notice this is a little bit wobbly now. Well, I got a catch during the hollowing, and it knocked it off center a bit, and I had to loosen the jaws and try to get it lined back up, and I couldn't get it lined up perfectly. Now I'm taking a couple cuts because I want a relief cut. Because this acts just like wood. If I just plunge this straight in, it'd swell up from the heat, and it'd catch the tool and fling it back at me. Now I'm cutting in at a bit of an angle and keep working my way down just a little bit at a time. And I want to leave a tenon that I can attach a foot to. So that looks about right for the tenon. I don't want to make it too tall because I don't want the foot to be gigantic. I want it to be in proportion to the turning. So now we're going to keep going down a little bit thinner, a little bit thinner. I'm going to put my finger up here and just grab this when it comes off. There we go. Beautiful. Now I'm going to use the same chuck I have and take the key and take off the little piece of nut that we have left over. And I have an ebony blank already rounded out. It has a tenon on it that fits the jaws here. We're going to tighten that down. Now, the very first thing I want to do is make sure that the blank is round and that the end is square. So we'll start that up. I'm going to go back to my regular size parting tool, which has legs somewhere in here. There it is. I'm organized. Yeah. Okay, we'll make one light cut here just to clean up the end. Good enough. And now I'm going to take my calipers and we're going to measure the little tenon I left on the end of the natural edge bowl I'm making out of the nut. Oops. There we go. And this is not like hypercritical, but I want to get a line on there so I know how wide to make the recess to accept the tenon. Okay, that looks good. Turn the lathe off. We're going to move our tool rest around to this end, and we'll use our parting tool to clear out most of that wood. Now I've got my tool rest up to where this is straight on center because I just want to do a push cut. And I'll push in. There we go. And I'm going to go out to that line I made with my calipers. Now I'm not making this as deep as I need it yet. I'm going to stop that, slide the tool rest out of the way, check this, see if it fits. Pretty close. Should be able to get on this next pass. And once it fits, I'm going to make it deeper and glue the thing together. There we go. Stop that, see how it works. And we're there. Okay, I'm just going to make it a little bit deeper, and then we'll glue it on. Okay, should be deep enough. Pull this out of the way. Yes, it is. Okay, now I'm going to take some Nut. We went through this last season, didn't we? Super glue. And I'm using thick super glue. And I'm going to spread it on the tenon. There we go. I don't want to really be slathering it because I don't want it to go through that hole in the bottom. It'd look kind of ugly. So I'm just going to glue it like on 3/4 of the way around. I'm going to take some accelerator and spray that on the wood. And that'll help set this up very quickly. So I'm just going to put that in there and put some pressure on it for a little while. And hold it. It only takes a few seconds to set up. It's nice weather we're having in Oklahoma right now. Heat index of 107. You know, we got 8 studio lights in here and a 10-year-old air conditioner. You're just lucky I was born without sweat glands. Okay, that's set up and I'm not glued to it. That's really good. Okay, so our next step is we're going to start shaping the ebony to fit and blend into our little vessel that we're making, our little natural edge bowl. So we'll get this out of the way. Don't want anything to fall into the lathe while we're turning. That would hurt me. So look at this. I'm just going to go ahead and take the parting tool and remove some of the wood quickly, and then we'll come in with the spindle gouge and clean it up some. The Gasser ebony is really nice to work with. It has a very fine dust. And when you're sanding it, you want to be careful about not breathing it too much. And there, I think I've got that knocked down to where I want it. I'm going to switch to my, what is it, 3/8" spindle gouge. And it's got a fingernail grind on it, which gives it a finer point and helps you do a little more detail work. Whoops. There we go. All that catch was is I put the tool on that ridge and it shoved it a little bit to my right. No big deal, as long as I catch it. And now I'm just touching it, rolling my body. You can see how that's blending into the shape that we already made. I want these to look seamless. And I also want to sweep the foot down, because when you're making something like this, you want to stand up proud of the table. You want it to kind of jut out, so that if you accelerate this angle towards the center of the piece, it makes it look like it lifts it up off the table. Although this will be on a very small table when it's done, it does lift it off. Okay. Now that I've got this where I want it, I'm going to go ahead and sand the ebony also up to 4,000 grit so it'll blend in and match the nut. Well, I've got this all sanded down again. I blended in the ebony into the nut and sanded all the way up to 4,000 grit. And this is the paper I'm using to get that high. It's actually used in automotive and glass uses, and it has a paper backing and it has actual diamond grit on it. And they go up to 10,000 grit, even higher, but that's more than I need to go through. I don't love sanding that much. Now I'm going to go back to my really thin parting tool. I'm going to part the bottom off. Again, I'm going to make the relief cut so it doesn't catch. Now I'm going to work with the tool not straight, but at a slight angle going up into the bottom. That way the outer edge of the bottom will sit flat on a surface. But I don't want to angle it too much because I could go up into the tenon that I put in there that's holding the nut on. But I still have to make a relief cut when I do this. And I want to take this down to the smallest nub possible, so when I clean up the bottom I have less work to do. You can see how thin that's getting. You can get really thin just by taking your time. Now ebony, the Gasser ebony, like all ebony, is a little bit brittle. So as I get close in here, if I use too much pressure, they'll just snap off. So now I'm holding the tool with one hand. And I'm making my final cut. I want to come out a little bit. I want to leave a tiny nub on there because if I cut it perfectly flush, if the wood tears out, it'll ruin the bottom and I can't sand that out. There we go. Well, now we still have the bottom to finish up and clean. So I turned a jam fit tenon, but this is a natural edge. So the jam is not at the mouth here. This will slide on. It's at the bottom where the tenon meets the inside bottom of the piece. And it's flat, so it holds it straight. And now I'm going to take a piece of masking tape and use this to help hold everything in place. And this is so much fun to work with. It's better than duct tape, but believe me. Okay, there we go. Anyway, I'll hold that flat. I'm going to wrap this around and get it to hold firm. Now this is a delicate hold, so you don't have to cut the end with a tool. You can actually sand it off if you're not feeling that up to it, but we're going to give it a shot here with the spindle gouge once I get some more tape on here that will hold it. Once I get this in place, everything will work great because I'm a professional. There we go. Okay, easy as pie and just as beautiful. So let's move this up, and now we're going to trim it off. Okay, it's a little bit off center, but I'm going to take my fingernail spindle gouge and just clean it. Just nibble it away. And the pressure of the heel of the tool into the bottom helps keep it flat. So now, I'm just going to slow it down and start working through my sandpaper grits. And then we're almost done. Well, a hand rub coat of wax brings out the beauty of the natural edge of the nut and the ebony base. So I hope you had a good time today with me going nuts over nuts. Until the next time on the Woodturning Workshop, keep turning. Man, I think I used a whole roll of tape here.
To purchase a DVD copy of this program, please call 800-823-7210. For more information about Woodturning Workshop, visit our website, rsupublictv.org.
This week on the Woodturning Workshop, we're going to try something we've never tried before. We're going to go nuts. Oops, about nuts. You okay? Now I'm cutting in at a bit of an angle. Look at these shavings. They are just incredible. Until the next time on the Woodturning Workshop, keep turning. I can't juggle.